But I definitely wanted to try and find a money trail back to the terrible decision making of the Western Australia government. I mean, when they ignore the scientific report that they requested, when they ignore the protests from the people, when they ignore history, where in Australia and other places it's been proven that it doesn't work, they instead choose to look at the one statistic that sort of shows success, and that's Queensland, where the numbers went from 1 to 0, which is not really a statistic.
Well, I think that statistic, Skyler, is that there's never been a shark attack on a meshed beach. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. There's never been a shark attack on a meshed beach in Australia since meshing began. I suppose at that level, it's a very hard thing to argue against. The trouble with this whole debate, it's just so complex. There are so many ways to view the situation from so many different people's perspective. If someone just got eaten by a shark or killed by a shark, it would be very hard to convince that family, or the wife, the son, the daughter, whatever it is, that culling isn't what you should do. I mean, it's just a natural situation. So I sort of understand.
You mean it's natural for people to want revenge in order to feel better about their loss?
I don't know if it would be so much revenge as that they would see this creating safety. But, my take on it all is that I think that if you go out into the, Serengeti Plains or in parts of Kenya or South Africa, you know that there's lions and there's tigers and there's cheetahs and leopards, and it's part of the big matrix of wildlife, and that you're putting yourself into their habitat. And a couple of things, you must be careful, respectful. You need knowledge to do it, or somebody else's knowledge to go out there safely. And really, because it's dangerous, we're not running out there and shooting every lion and tiger because, it's going to make it safer. So that to me is a little bit of a parallel situation. And that's how I've always viewed the ocean, and always will. It's not a personal swimming pool. It's a wild, and it's one of the last great wildernesses on the earth. And sharks are a part of that, an integral part of that, and always have been. And so every time I go in the water, I'm aware. I go, okay, I'm stepping into the ocean. And over the years, I learned to read signs. Not the signs on the beach, but the natural signs out in the water. Early and late, for a fact it's more dangerous because it's feeding time. It's pretty basic. The other thing is, if there's fish shoaling, something else is chasing them, sharks could be chasing them. Birds diving is another indication. I've watched a lot of times in my life of sharks going through, and a couple of birds will just hover over it and follow it. And you just pick up different signs. There's I think, a feeling that you can actually get sometimes that it's a little bit eerie out here today. Keep your eyes open. I'm always looking. So they're just inbuilt habits I've developed and awareness that I've tried to develop. And I think that's part of being a surfer, to be honest.
Nothing that you said right now sounds like a revelation. It sounds like pretty common information.
I'm just giving...
No, I'm not judging you. My point is that I would guess that surfers are aware of all of those things, and yet they choose to surf even in the risky situation.
Yeah.
So if our mentality is going to do, I'm going to do what I want, regardless of what you say, regardless of what the risk is more education or creating awareness actually going to solve the problem if they're going to ignore the signs anyway?
Yeah. Look, I think some people will always ignore the signs, and some people will never become aware. It's such an open-ended question. to surfers aren't anymore naturally that aware that like they used to be years ago, particularly when we never had leg ropes and we had to do a lot of swimming.
So wait a minute, did you just say that awareness is actually getting worse?
I think in some instances, yes. And I think one of the most important things that shark research can do is bring knowledge and put it in front of people, because I think it needs to be done, because I don't think a lot of people realise it. And especially, say, in Australia, where you have enormous immigration going on, there's people now in the ocean that have never even seen the ocean in their childhood or even in their adulthood, for that matter. And I just think basic education is really important. And if there's anything about the whole so-called shark problem, that's a funny word to use, but I'll just use it now, is one of the most important things anyway is research and knowledge, and then education.
But again, it's a paradigm, because we have more information than ever before. So, and there has been more research, there's more information available, yet awareness has decreased. So if I argue that way, then I could say that there might be better research in the future, but that will just be ignored as well if we have a population that simply chooses to be unaware.
Yes, again, it's a complex question, but I don't think the education has been forthcoming. I don't think there's been an effort to really educate people about the ocean, about sharks. I know there's more research and there's more knowledge, but how many people have access to that?
Whose responsibility is it to make sure this education reaches people?
Well, I think it should start at schools, in schools. I mean, that's an obvious place.
That's public schools, so then that falls on the government.
It should be part of, natural history or whatever they call it nowadays. And, I suppose the media, rather than being sensationalistic about shark attacks, when something comes up that is an issue, they could actually run real stories written by people who know.
In the wildest reaches of your imagination, can you picture that ever actually happening?
No.
Okay, so we can forget that one.
See, the definition of a pessimist. Very experienced optimist.
Oops. Well, two pessimists having a conversation isn't going to be a very fun interview for people to watch, at least.
So, when you get to be 62, you've seen a lot, and some things just never change, which defies all common sense. You would hope that one day that people would do it, and perhaps in a small way it has happened, but not enough.
Well, that's what's so disturbing to me about the coal. You say you'd think that, not only would things change, but you'd think that they would improve. And in fact, they're getting worse from some look at what's happening in Western Australia. I mean, this is like something from the 1800s.
Mm. Yes. Well, the problem is you have the so-called disinformation or misinformation. Politicians are brilliant at it. They just make a comment. It doesn't have to be true, but they'll make a comment that suits them. It tends to go out there as being fact. So then you've already muddied the water, and then you try to come in and you try to correct that. It's very hard to clarify something that's already muddy.
Because what gets in your head first is what sticks.
Pretty much, and I to some degree, people are controlled and manipulated by the media because that's their source of information.
Mm-hmm.
Some people actually believe politicians tell the truth. Well, I think there's a few left out there who believe that. There seems to always be ulterior motives, around money, around power. It's a very, very, very difficult world to walk a path through and just be objective and get your message heard.
Have you developed your own theories as you from over here watching the Western Australia cull?
In what manner do you mean?
Money and power.
No, I don't know what's going on there at that level because it's I don't live there and I'm not too sure. I know there's a lot of emotional reaction going on over there amongst people. They're genuinely quite scared.
Are you surprised when you hear surfers on the news say, "I want these sharks killed"?
I saw a fantastic thing today that one surfer said, "I'm tired of these hippies saying we shouldn't kill sharks."
Mm-hmm. I saw that too.
I loved it. You know, I mean, imagine the head of CSIRO being called a hippie. You know, you've got to have a bit of comic relief in the middle. Look, surfing is so big. There are so many surfers. It has been swamped by the masses that nowadays surfing is a vastly different culture than it used to be. So you're going to get every conceivable opinion that you'll get on land in any other context. So if someone says something sort of ridiculous or funny, I just go, "Oh yeah, well that's typical." I think, you know, unlike years ago, surfing had a little bit more of a genuine, I think, feeling of responsibility, and they saw surfing as being part of a bigger way of living. And I think people would have had a lot more sensitivity towards things like conservation and
So the people that were spending that much time in the ocean were doing it out of a pure love of being in the water. Therefore, coming along with that is a respect for what lives in the water. Yeah. Nowadays, surfing is so popular that you have all walks of life trying to get into it, not necessarily people who have a connection or a respect.
Yeah, or an understanding.
So there are more, I guess it's a generational thing. There are more people in the water who are surfers now that would like to see sharks killed than in the past.
Yeah. So
did you ever hear people say things like that back in the?
No, it was never really an issue. And I mean,
did you even talk about sharks?
Oh, all the time. I mean, sharks of all of my generation and my friends. The only thing we were ever scared of in the ocean, it wasn't drowning or big surf or anything. It was only sharks. I mean, sharks were such a strong part of your makeup in the way you were relating to the ocean. You never, ever, ever not thought about it when you surfed. I mean, I grew up here surfing, you know, through the 60s, and sharks were everywhere back then. There was way more sharks than there are now, and we'd see them regularly and have to get out of the water regularly. And as I said earlier, because we had no leg ropes and we were swimming, you know, it was on your mind quite often, and especially when they're underneath you. I mean, I've had sharks under me and around me and circling me, and you know, all sorts of.
So it's just something you lived with.
Something you lived with, you know. And I mean, I would have hated to have seen someone attacked, or nowadays my son attacked. But again, I don't think that culling would make any difference. I can't see that it would make any difference. You know, how many sharks do you cull? And then there's one that comes in that didn't get culled, and it's the one that bites. I just don't know if there's a correlation between thinning out sharks and reducing shark attacks. I don't think it's that simple.
Unless, of course, you get rid of all sharks.
Well, yeah.
What's wrong with that?
The whole ecosystem will collapse, as it is.
You know what? I'm tired of hearing that answer. Why does it have to be about us losing our ecosystem? Why can't it be about it's wrong to slaughter things?
It's not our ecosystem. It's the ecosystem.
That depends who you ask, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. That depends who you ask. A lot of humans actually think that it is our God-given right to do as we please with this planet.
No, well, I don't feel like that. I feel like we're just part of the whole ecological structure of this planet. We're just part of it. And if anything, we should be stewards of it. You start manipulating the natural world to your own wishes or to your own advantage economically and so forth, you're going to wind up in trouble. Sooner or later there'll be trouble, as we're going to find out in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
You said that there used to be a lot more sharks.
Here, where I've grown up, yes.
What I find interesting about that is that sharks are protected now, or at least some species of them are protected now, yet numbers are still worse.
This ocean, when I grew up, was just alive with fish. There was just every conceivable, type of cold water fish that you could imagine, and in vast numbers. That has just about disappeared, and along with that, so have the sharks, because it's not the food. And I think it's pretty basic.
So everything's going away. It's not just one.
Everything's diminished, enormously. I mean, not just a little bit, but 80% or something.
Describe the most life-filled day that you remember in the old days compared to the most lifeless day you've experienced in the same spot now. Like how many different... Name some of the animals that you encountered.
Well, I've even seen manta rays down here, and they're not meant to be here in such cold conditions, but at different times. I've even seen flying fish down here many years ago, which aren't meant to be here in such cold water. I've sat and watched, huge manta rays, stingrays, sharks, an abundance of fish where, in Lorne is a really quite a large, beautiful bay, and I suppose you could say it's probably 2 nautical miles in diameter, and I've seen fish literally every couple of inches in that bay, garfish, just swarming so thick, like you could literally, we used to put a net in the water and pull them up. Well, you just don't see those anymore. I've seen dolphins go through. We paddle out into the middle of them. We sat and watched them going past the coast, and probably a good 45 minutes, as far as I could see. The whole ocean was just dolphins heading west. And we waited and waited. Then one of my friends and I paddled out into the middle of them, got out there and went, it's a little bit scary because they're just going out fast and it's just so thick that we turned around and came back in. We came back in, we paddled out, probably took us nearly 30 minutes to get out there. So I would say in all, probably 4 or 5 or 6 hours, there were dolphins going past. Wow. Thousands and thousands. I've never seen that again. And that was around about 1965, 4.
They come investigate you?
No, they were going somewhere else. They were just going past us.
What about your encounters with sharks? You say you saw them. Plenty.
Yeah, I've seen them on many, many occasions. I've had them swim under me while I'm surfing, just sitting there. I've had them go past regularly.
Are these always white sharks?
I'm not sure. Sometimes I've been able to recognise what it was. A lot of times here there were bronze whalers.
Mm-hmm.
The only way I picked out the whites were they were always the really big ones. And I've never had one really take an interest in me, other than to let me know it wasn't happy. So I left, and there's a behaviour pattern you can pick in a shark that when it's not happy. It's always a bit erratic and it'll go past really fast and then turn and do a few things like that.
What does that mean? He's not happy that you're there?
Yeah, I'd say so. Territorial, or it's sizing you up for lunch, who knows?
But you listened.
Yeah, if I see that, I go in. And I've also seen sharks many times go past me and I haven't worried about it. I've just gone, okay,
based on their behavior.
That one's not a problem. Just they're like dogs, you know. It's like hair standing up and it's growling. You're not going to take it on, so to speak. I've had strange encounters with sharks when I was sailboarding, where I was trying to work out, you know, were they interested in me at all? Because there were so many of them underneath me at times, and you know, I've done all sorts of things like slap the board on the water and, you know, make all sorts of unusual movements to see if that would stimulate any effect, and they took no notice. So it's an unusual situation that what would make a shark just come up and bite you straight away. I've never been able to nut that out, what's really going on. Obviously it's just very hungry and aggressive at that moment, you know, and what else can it be? I've also saved a guy drowning one day and had a big shark circle us for 20 minutes. When I picked him up and put him on my board, it just came out of the water behind him and just slid back down. And I was on a 7'6" surfboard, and the shark was way in excess of double the board size, so probably 18 feet.
Wow.
Which, when a shark gets that big, you don't look at the length, you look at the width. They just get massive. You just can't imagine the girth, the volume.
Well, let's spend some time describing the shark sliding up out of the water.
I put the guy on my board, and we were facing each other. He was on the tail and I was on the nose, and I was just talking to him about, you know, we've got to get in. And
he hadn't been attacked. He was just drowning.
He was drowning. He lost his surfboard and had gone out to sea in a very large rip.
Okay.
And I was just casually talking to him about it, letting him regain his strength. And I was explaining that we're going to paddle across the rip to the other side of the bay and going along the edge of some rocks and seaweed.
Were you aware of the shark circling at that time?
No. And I'm just sitting there speaking to him, and then just out the corner of my eye there, the shark's just risen out of the water really slowly, silent, no noise, and just sat there like that.
With his head out?
With his head out, massive big eye. And I just saw it and kept talking, and then I went, oh look, I think we better get going. And I didn't tell him, I didn't want him to know. It's the last thing I wanted him to panic or, you know, to be filled with anxiety. So we just started paddling, and I said, don't paddle hard, just paddle in unison with me, and, you know, just relax, it'll be all right. So we're heading across this big channel. We're out about 500 yards off the beach. And the whole time, the shark, I'd just see it every now and then. It was down about 10 to 15 feet below the surface, and I'd just see it as the sunlight, you know, would strike it. And I'd just see it every now and then, going really slow, you know, like the proverbial aircraft carrier or something. Just this really, really hardly moving to just get itself through the water. Quite beautiful, really, but not in that moment. And that went on for like 20 minutes. And we got across the channel and across to the other side where there was really, really long bull kelp. And I always remembered there'd never been a recorded shark attack in the kelp in our so-called knowledge. And I went, I hope this is true. So we got across to that, and then I just turned and followed the coast in to get in, and quite close to the beach, it disappeared. I just never saw it again. And I got right in on the beach. It was a very, very steep beach, and it was quite big swell, and it was just surging up this beach and then drawing back. And I got right near the edge and turned around and just saw this big surge coming. I thought, oh, we're right, we'll get up here, and we've made it. Right then, the shark was coming straight at the guy, mouth open, white eye, right on his feet when I saw it, and I just lifted my feet out and grabbed the board, hugged the board because I thought it was going to hit and it was going to be a big explosion. And we're only 30 feet off the beach, and nothing happened. I just turned around and the guy was on the back, obviously, I was on the front of the board, and nothing happened, and I was just bewildered. I couldn't believe it.
You mentioned that shark coming towards you guys in the wave, and you said you saw the white, so the eye was rolled back, and you said its mouth was open. But of course its mouth was open, they breathe that way.
They also do that when they're about to bite, the protective sheath over their eye.
So the mouth wasn't just a little open?
No, I'm talking about this. I actually just sort of bit the guy. I lifted my legs and went, he's gone. Like, bang, and it didn't happen. So I had some friends sitting up on the cliffs at saw it all, and they said they came out I went back out, and they came out about an hour and a quarter later, and they just said they couldn't believe what was happening. And the thing turned on its axis almost instant like that, and just went straight out to sea, full speed.
How much did it help that you weren't nervous?
I like to think it helped a lot. I've always felt that that's a really important component of interacting with sharks if you see one. I think that, like a dog, if you feel fear, there's far higher risk that they will pick up on it. There's no question they'll pick up on it. And I've actually paddled in from surfing without ever seeing anything. Out there for an hour or two, haven't seen a thing. Suddenly I get this really strong feeling about sharks, and it gets really intense. And if it doesn't go away, I paddle in. You know, I can't give any objective evidence or anything to say that that's a sign that there's a shark around and I know what's going on or blah, blah, blah. But I live by it.
I'm sure you've sat down with other surfers and they've said they felt the same thing.
Yeah. But I live by that.
Absolutely.
Just like sometimes I've seen them and I don't come in. Sometimes I've seen them and I do come in. Sometimes I don't see them and I come in.
Is that us honing in to a sense that has been there and we don't really use? I mean, how do you explain that sense?
I can't, and I don't know. That's what I mean. I can't be objective, scientific.
Right.
So all I can say is I live by it.
It's worked so far.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I know I've talked to my son about it, and I've said, if you're ever really worried, don't stay there. And even if there's not a shark there, if you're feeling that way and one does come along, it's just not a good thing to be doing. Not a good way to be out there in that situation. You're not present and you're not relaxed. You're putting, I think, yourself to some degree at more risk. Anyway, got him in, gave him a lecture about not surfing there because it's beyond his capabilities, and I don't know if I ought to tell people this, but I turned around and went back out. And just didn't have any fear. I didn't feel like it was after me. I thought, oh well, after all that.
He was maybe intrigued by the signals the drowning person was giving off?
Yeah, and probably the shape of two people on that board, and, you know, they're very curious things, sharks. I know, you know, my uncles used to, when they were gutting fish, I came from a professional fishing family, and when they were gutting fish, they'd lay a sheet of newspaper on the water when the sharks are around, just to watch what they'd do. And they always would just come in under the newspaper and just follow it floating on the water. And, you know, a lot of the time they're very, very curious.
Did you make eye contact with the shark when he lifted his head up?
Yeah. I mean, not directly like that. I didn't want the guy to see me looking, but I was, you know, just casually look over. And
it was unquestionably looking at you.
And that's what it was doing. Yeah. That's what whites do.
And that's pretty unique among sharks, lifting their heads up and looking around.
Yeah, from what I understand, yeah. I've never seen any other shark do it. I don't really want to either, to be honest.
They must have miraculous eyes to be able to see underwater and above.
Yeah. Phenomenal. You know, I mean, when we're over tagging them in South Australia, I saw it a lot. They'd just roll over and swim past and look up at you.
Does that make you think it's an intelligent creature?
Oh, they're certainly intelligent. They've got different personalities. They have different moods. I've seen enough of sharks to know that they're all individuals.
Some people are uncomfortable attributing a word such as a personality to a shark. Do you have any qualms with that at all?
No, it's personalities in everything, every animal. Sharks are no different. I've seen sharks playful. I've seen them do all sorts of things.
What do you mean, playful?
I've seen them at a surf break up north, actually near Byron Bay. There was a big hole at the end of one of these breaks. There was a shark that used to live there, or at least it was there for quite a while through the year. And if you came too close to that hole or tried to paddle across it, the shark would just come out of the water spinning, and it would do end over end loops like that, or it would spin like that and then land on its back. And if you didn't get out of there, it would come and do it really close to you. So it was amazing.
It was communicating. It was sending a message.
It was going, hey, this is my hole. Go over there.
What kind of a shark is that?
I don't know. I've tried to find out. I had no idea back then. I wasn't very good at identifying sharks that were in northern waters, warmer waters.
I think there is a spinner shark.
I have heard this, yes. I thought it might have been such a shark, but
wow.
The great thing about that is it kept a lot of the people from surfing that break, because they just went, oh no, there's a shark there, and the word spread. It was phenomenal.
That's a good segue into something else. People realizing a shark is there, and then that scaring them. Isn't the reality that the sharks are always there?
Well, I think you'd love to believe doesn't happen to be there when you're there. I think that's the psychology for a lot of people.
But they're living with us. We're in the water with them, and they're leaving us alone for the most part.
I mean, that's the amazing thing to me. I think of all the years and the sharks I have seen, and how many must have gone past that I didn't see, and how often they've been right there and I haven't noticed them. And I know from people that have observed them from hang gliders and so forth, watching sharks swimming through bathers just along in front here. A friend of mine does it, and he's just amazed by it. And no one sees it. It doesn't interfere.
Yeah.
And he's watched that for years and years and years. So, the vast majority of the time, sharks are not interested in humans. There'd be 20 times, 50 times more attacks if that was the case.
Generally, I'm all for awareness. I think awareness leads to education, change. But if we're going to react with fear to learning about sharks, I almost, right now I'm starting to think we're better off letting people continue not knowing sharks are there.
Yeah. Again, that's my twisted sense of humour. I don't mind them knowing the sharks are there, and they might get out of the water.
Right.
There are certain advantages.
You like isolation. I want to, since I'm here with you, I want to hear about the time period in your life when you went off and pretty much left everyone else. What was happening during that time in your life?
How do you mean what was happening? What?
Did something specific inspire you to get away from society completely?
I'm not sure I've ever tried to completely get away from society, but I've certainly always enjoyed or been drawn to remote locations and wilderness areas and spending considerable time in those places. I'm just very comfortable that way, just as I'm very comfortable out in the ocean. I don't find it a place of anxiety or fear. I actually find it to be a place of comfort. So, that's always been inherent in my makeup, and along with some of my friends that I grew up with. I did spend some time, out in those areas, or a lot more time in those areas back in the early 70s when I was on the run from what we called national service, which is the call-up.
The draft.
The draft, as you call it in America, for the Vietnam War. So I spent 2.5 years on the run, basically. And I was very lucky because this coast was totally uncrowded. The tourism hardly existed. And further down the coast.
Is this where you were hiding?
Yeah.
Right out here?
2 hours drive. Back then it was like going to the moon. People just didn't know about it, and there was no one down there except local farmers.
How hard did they look for you? I mean, was this a really big deal that you were dodging the draft?
It began to get that way. As time went on, it got more intense. By then I had a very good pattern, and the chances of them getting me weren't very high. I mean, there was no mobile phones. Phone booths didn't exist. We didn't have helicopters flying around looking for people. It was a different world.
Mm.
And today it would be very, very difficult to do.
Yeah.
But for me then, no problem.
You were already a little bit of a public figure, so it was sending a message. I mean, it wasn't just your business. People were hearing about what you were doing.
Yeah, certainly.
Was that a protest on your part to the... Were you at all making a statement, like a protest to the war, or are you just not going to go to war, period?
It's both. There's certainly a protest against the war, against conscription. We were under attack. No one had threatened either Australia or any individuals that I know of directly. I saw the Vietnam War as a political construction. I think there was a lot of deceit, and really to waste human lives in a war like that, to me, was just the absolute most disgraceful thing I could ever think of. I had friends that went, and I never argued about it. I thought, that's your decision, that's fine. And when they came back, I never felt... A lot of people, were very critical of people that had gone, but I wasn't like that. I just felt that, that's a decision you have to make as an individual. And when those people came back, they needed all the support they could get, because they were really, truly wounded psychologically by what they'd experienced. And the last thing you need to do is marginalise or ridicule those sort of people in that situation. They didn't understand what they were doing. They didn't realise what it was like until they'd been there, I think, a lot of them. So, yes, it was a protest, but it was purely more toward the politicians and, the people that create these situations. I think my take on all of it was, if the politicians went to war, I wonder how many wars we'd have.
Right, exactly.
I'd like to get them up there in the front lines. You first.
Isn't this war on sharks also political?
In certain instances, I have no doubt it's political, yeah. It's being seen to be protecting the people, which is good for votes.
I have...
You can't see him getting around the caftan.
What's that?
You can't see him getting around the caftan, can you?
Caftan?
Caftan, a pair of sandals.
Oh, right. Well, what I'm getting at is, what message... We already talked about how it's difficult to educate someone who already has something in their mind. What's the best message that you could give to, say, fellow surfers who actually want things like the cull to take place? How can you reach them?
I think the most important thing is not to create an us and them mentality. Not to... You'll never achieve anything by being stubborn and criticising the opposite point of view. You really need to listen and just quietly and consistently put forward objective information, I think, is all you can really hope to do. Whether somebody chooses to change their mind or listen or learn to see things differently, It's up to them, and you can't do much about it. I'm just, again, at 62 and being a bit forthright in my life over certain issues, I've seen that it doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about all I could really offer. Just to keep the communication going and keep trying to be objective, and even being prepared to really listen to their point of view. And why have they got that point of view? And, there may be valid reasons. And there may just be emotional reasons. There may be, you don't know until you keep the dialogue going. I've got friends that are completely for killing sharks. Not many, but some do.
And you've had a conversation of this sort with them?
Mm-hmm.
What's the most compelling reason that they've given?
They didn't really have one. It was very emotional, fear-based. The other thing, and again, I said it early, I did really listen to, they go, well, what if your son just got beaten, or what if your mother or your brother or a friend? And I said, well, you know what? I'd have to wait till that happened, but I do feel for those people. I understand what that would be like. I've been through enough in life to be able to put myself in someone else's position. And I really do have to listen to that and hear what they're saying, because it is valid. But my point is, I don't know if culling would make any difference to that. I just can't see it really changing things. In the sense that there's going to be less shark attacks, especially on coasts that are open and raw and vast, like, say, West Australia. Now, up in a place like Perth, you could probably put nets close to the beach, and it may make some difference. It really might. The problem with nets is it catches a lot of other things. It's always a problem. There's no evidence there's such a thing as a rogue shark, one that suddenly chooses, like some tigers and so forth in India or wherever, that start to feed on human beings. They actually shift their prey to being human beings as opposed to seals or fish and so forth. So if I thought that was the case, if that could be proven, well, there's a different issue. But I can't, as far as I know, see that happens. I think sometimes a shark just sees a human being and goes, well, this looks edible, I'll have this one. I don't think it becomes a source of prey.
We're not solving a shark problem, we're solving a fear problem.
Mm.
And then you have to ask, is it okay to kill other creatures to make ourselves feel better?
No, well, personally I don't, but I'm just talking about the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I mean...
Do you worry about what's happening in Western Australia sending a message to other places and a cull happening in your waters?
I haven't thought that through that far, to be honest. I don't think it's a good situation over there. There's a huge amount of emotional reaction. The politicians aren't giving real information out. They're not listening to people who do study sharks and do have knowledge. They're not putting money into more research, which could make a huge difference, whether it be listening stations with tagging, at least know that the shark's in the area, finding out what's going on. Why are there more shark attacks suddenly in that area? There could be some, I don't know if you'd say simple reason, but certainly some profound reason, which could help reduce the risk. I'm always big on education. They need to be finding out what's going on instead of just trying to eliminate it, because you can't eliminate it anyway. I mean, you cannot possibly kill every shark in the ocean, realistically, and I just don't think that that's a solution.
As far as state of mind. You know, people were told that it would make them safer, so they just accepted that it was going to make them safer. But I personally would feel worse if there was a hook of meat hanging out in the water where I was surfing.
Yeah, I think dropping a baited hook out in the ocean's not really sensible at all.
So, what lengths would you go to keep that from happening where you surf?
I'd certainly be protesting and creating some sort of collective group that could lobby to have it stopped. I mean, you could put a baited hook 5-10 k's out, and it probably wouldn't affect you. I certainly wouldn't have it in close. And years ago, when I grew up in Lorne, there were baited hooks in the bay, and they were just part of, that's how it was. And there were just sharks being caught constantly in it, and it would bring them into the hooks. Yeah, I think it's actually very dangerous to do that. I know that, when amateur fishermen are out offshore here burleying and trying to catch blue sharks and tuna and so forth, suddenly there's often more sharks around, other sharks.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's a smart thing to do, no. I'm surprised they're using baited hooks. I thought they would have used nets.
I don't know what to say. None of it makes sense.
It surprises me. I'm surprised that even the people over there don't realise that that's actually a bit more risky, because I was also told that they're not allowed to drop cray pots in close anymore for the same reason.
Well, that's not true.
Yeah, they've created a no-go zone.
That was really interesting, because when we were going by those, when I was in the south of Western Australia monitoring the drum lines, they had the cray pots in close to shore, and one of the people on board was telling me that they've discovered that white sharks like to eat crayfish as well. So here you've got fishermen baiting for sharks all the while.
Mm. I've noticed in my life that sharks hang around cray pots. I've seen it over and over and over and over. They'll be just hanging around because they're getting the burley trail off the bait.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolute fact.
So when protesting doesn't work and when education doesn't work, you come to a bit of a standstill. You either have to accept it and not keep fighting, or you have to take it to the next level, right?
Which is the next level?
I don't know.
No, I certainly don't, and I just keep coming back to education. You've got to get more information. We have to have more research. We have to try and understand more deeply the nature of what's happening.
I don't think it's going to happen. I think we are on a path towards disconnecting further rather than reconnecting.
It's quite possibly right. I mean, the rest of the way we relate to the rest of the world's like that, so possibly that's the outcome. There's not really many options other than, the ones you just mentioned.
You wouldn't condone any radical behavior?
It depends what this radical behaviour is. I mean, if you want to go out and...
What if you took the old Sea Shepherd approach back when they were still sinking boats? What if they sunk fisheries boats?
I'd like to be on board sometimes. I'm not sure that fisheries are to blame, that's the trouble, but yeah, look, there's nothing like a little civil disobedience. Well, I can't say I'm against that.
It doesn't matter if fisheries is to blame. It's the tool that's being allowed. I mean, at some point, you have to accept responsibility.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, look, I don't know what you could do in this situation. Go out and pull the hooks up or whatever. It's hard to know what you can do.
Well, they tried to help. Some people tried to help sharks revive, and then they declared those people as breaking the law because you can't touch protected species. You can't touch They got in trouble for touching the protected species that they were in the process of trying to kill.
Mm. Yes. Yes. Well, contradiction seems to be a fairly profound part of our world nowadays. Perhaps it always was.
How about the Great Barrier Reef? Is that on your mind?
What they're doing up there, you mean?
Yeah.
If what I've heard is going to happen, it's atrocious. It's a disgrace.
I thought it became official today.
What?
Dumping onto the reef.
There.
It's going to happen.
With the port and all that for the coal.
Yeah.
They're going to build that port.
My understanding is that
You heard that today?
yeah, it said it was
I
official.
haven't heard it today.
Oh, no, I shouldn't.
I thought it was still in a lot of
Yeah,
funding.
yeah, that's what I thought.
Oh,
I haven't heard anything on the news.
okay. Yeah, I shouldn't believe everything I read.
Where'd you see that? Newspaper?
It was a link that I saw on Facebook, but it wasn't just a person saying it on Facebook. It linked to an article. The government's going through with it.
Be a little bit careful about those, but you could be right. I mean, it's just stupid.
Well, I just left the Bahamas where they're doing it. They are destroying the mangroves where baby sharks grow up, and they know about it. There's 7 years worth of research based on mistakes they made in the past, and it doesn't matter because the company that wants to put it in has too much money to shove around.
Well, that coal station up there, that port, it's just massive. I mean, it's massive. Consequences would just be horrendous.
You guys have many? You guys go? Did you go surfing together a lot?
No.
Not really.
No, he lives on the other side over there, in two different worlds. He comes over occasionally and we catch up.
Have you learned anything from him as far as sharks go?
Yeah, a lot.
I'm glad you rephrased it. The end section.
Sharks.
Have you learned anything?
Oh no, it was Kent that got me involved. First came to me about the white tag program, and you know, from then on I started reading and looking at all the data that they had about what, you know, the thing that fascinates a lot of people. One of the things that fascinates me about the whole tagging exercise is tracking the sharks, seeing what they actually do. I find that absolutely astounding. Where they swim to, how often they do it, when they do it. It's amazing.
Because we assume animals behave the way we do. Set up shop and live their whole lives there.
Is that for me?
Yep.
Well, I always knew they moved around, but I just didn't really realise
You didn't know they crossed oceans.
they crossed oceans, and I didn't realise that their patterns were so specific that they could come back to a certain area almost to the day, year after year. That's what really astounded me.
One of the here.
Put it inside you. No?
How's that?
I can't.
That's great.
It's dark enough to where you can't.
Bow tie?
It's just right under your chin.
Excellent.
There we go. The distinct populations. I find it pretty interesting that they don't really cross that invisible border.
I think that's only in certain areas, though, isn't it? That they don't really interact or cross certain boundaries.
Yeah, well, that's what we've found here. It's the eastern zone of Australia. So what we've found is that sharks that we've been working on the east coast of Australia all stem from this eastern area of Victoria, and it was originally Wilson's Promontory, which was originally linked to Tasmania. So Tasmania was linked to the rest of Australia, and it was a land bridge, effectively. And when that land bridge was covered in water, Wilson's Promontory was created, and the sharks that originated on the eastern side of that land bridge, for some obscure reason, choose not to come any further west. So it's almost as if the land bridge has created a demarcation line. That's the only one that's been located here in Australia. We're working on the next phase out west.
How many different colors of sharks have you seen in the years of your surfing? Like a wide variety of all the same species? All white shark?
Well, mostly because I've lived here. Mostly it's been white pointers and bronze whales.
Right.
Mostly.
But do the white pointers differ a lot from individual to individual?
In the colours?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they look a little more bronzish.
Mm-hmm.
Other times they look a bit more bluish. It's about all I've noticed. Darker. They can be a lot darker on their backs. That's about the only variation I've noticed. Thresher sharks. I've seen a few thresher sharks. They have frightened the living hell out of me a couple of times because I thought the shark had to have been about 50 foot because its fin wasn't its fin, it was its tail.
Yeah.
But just sometimes you look at it and it takes a few seconds to go, that's that, okay. But when you see something out of the water this high,
Yeah.
there's a certain response that's automatic. And so, not a lot of variation really. Unlike, say, if you're up north, up in the warmer water.
Have you encountered thresher sharks?
No, I haven't, but friends of mine have. Further out west in Victoria, around Portland, they see them quite regularly.
Yeah.
We've come across, actually, the last trip we did down to Wilson's Prom, we hooked up a grey nurse, which is...
That's unusual.
Yeah, virtually unheard of along that strip. And grey nurses, by and large, are thought to be mid-New South Wales, that area.
Mm-hmm. What about any other weird sharks? The ones that are really mysterious and we don't see very often. Never caught any of those by mistake?
Not as yet.
What's a shark that you really would like to see that you haven't yet?
That I'd like to see?
Yeah. That's eluded you.
I haven't seen a hammerhead caught. Yeah, I think I'd like to see a decent sized hammerhead.
I just dove with the great hammerheads in Bimini. That is an amazing animal.
Yeah, they're an incredible looking animal. I've never seen one in real life, swimming. A couple of friends of mine have had them, follow them on sailboards.
Yeah,
right up behind them.
We have a lot of them off the east coast here, Victoria.
Yeah.
Victoria is quite unique because it has a couple of different currents. It picks up the eastern Australian current, comes into Wilson's Prom. So you get different varieties on that side of Wilson's Prom than you do on the western side. So here we actually get, we have the white sharks on the eastern side, where we have mum, dad and the kids. On the far west here we have some big white sharks. So that'd be interesting. I'd actually like to see a significantly large white shark in the western part of the state.
How close?
Not on a bit of foam.
You don't consider the one off Albany to be pretty big?
Yeah. 5 metres is large.
I thought it was bigger than that.
Yeah, it was around about that. I mean, the last trip Wayne came with us out to South Australia, we had a couple of 5 metre jobs.
Yeah.
And they are significantly bigger than 4.5 metres.
Right.
That was quite amazing.
Have either of you been invited to go out on the cage diving trips?
That's what we've done.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, when we go out on the research trips, we go out with the cage diving operators, and they become, and they're not cage diving trips when we go out there, effectively research trips. Yeah, the foxes. Actually, both. We've been with the foxes and Neptune, Calypso Star.
So that's a collaboration effort. They then welcome you on board, and are you learning from them? Or are you doing your own tagging?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the foxes pioneered the cage diving industry, and obviously Rodney's got a history beyond that.
Right.
But I mean, Rodney's a classic case in point. There's somebody that was, stared death in the eye, and he chose to come back and study it and conserve it. And some people will be sceptical and say, "Oh, he's made a business out of it." But once you actually know the family, they go way beyond that. They are very passionate about sharks and conservation.
Some surfers I've spoken to hated the cage dive industry because they were convinced that it teaches sharks to eat people. And then I've also, from those same surfers' mouths, they've said, once I went out there, it changed my mind completely, once I really saw what it was about.
Mm.
And then there's yet surfers who refuse to go out there because they don't want to have vivid images of a great white's teeth in action. Did seeing a great white pursuing bait make you feel any better or worse about being in the water with them?
I've been on anxiety medication ever since. No, not at all. My whole the thing that I got out of that trip we did was being in the cage. Obviously, you're safe, and that just took away any sense of self-preservation at all. That's just, I didn't even have to think about that. All I was doing was observing the shark completely from a different point of view, and I found that fascinating just to watch what it was doing and the way they glide. And, they're like big planes or something in the ocean. They're just such a beautiful movement.
Yeah.
I mean, I get a little poetic about that stuff because I love birds and things like that. So when I was just watching the way they moved, I just thought, what a remarkable, beautiful animal it is in its own right.
It's the first thing I noticed.
Mm.
First time I ever saw them. They glide by like a ghost.
Yeah.
Yeah. How can something so big be so quiet and so graceful?
Yeah.
Yeah, that and then the other thing I realised was how incredibly astute they were about what they're up to. You just watch one just disappear into the vastness of the scene. You go, oh yeah, how's that? And you spend a couple of seconds just looking. Next minute you turn around and things just it's none of it out, Or when we're throwing the baits, you're pulling it in to get them close to the boat to put the tag in, and if it couldn't get the bait on a couple of runs, suddenly it would just come out of the sunlight, especially in the afternoon. I kept watching that, going, that's amazing. That thing has worked that out so quick that the sun's that angle. I've got more chance. Way beyond instinct. This is intelligence.
This is problem-solving behavior.
Yeah.
I saw them in South Africa not only stop coming from the sides, as though, when they stop doing that, it's like they understand that someone on the deck can see them. And they stopped coming from the sides. And not only did they come from under the boat, they came from under the boat and the cage, which were both visual obstacles for the bait operator.
Mm.
And so, after that, the shark just kept breaching on the bait and guard every time because there was no warning.
Yeah, I know. That's
How else can you explain that? Other than actual intelligent thought, problem-solving minds.
Similar behaviour to a dog, really.
Oh, there's still people today that don't want to attribute dogs as being intelligent or having personalities.
Mm.
But yeah, I didn't know if that was silly. The first thing I thought of is that they're like dogs because you don't know I wanted to put together patterns. I was like, you know, whenever you first discover something, you're like, oh, I've got this worked out.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you find out you don't.
Yeah.
Because they're all different.
Yeah. And the other thing, when you get in that cage, it gives you such a amount of time to really observe the characteristics of the individuals, and you know, and I could see straight away, that one there, I'd probably get out of the cage around that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the other one, another one, and you go, no, not with that one. And that was really obvious. I mean, I've observed it from the surface, but to be underwater and seeing it was quite amazing, because some you just go, oops, this one's, you just come in and you go, ooh, he's bristling.
Bad headache.
Yeah, you would not want to be, you wouldn't even put your arm out the cage for some of them.
So, meaning if you got out of the cage, he would welcome that challenge. He would.
There was, yeah, I mean, it'd obviously take a bit of time to sum you up, I suppose, but it'll be very dangerous.
Some will get out of there. They're scared of you, or they don't know what you are, so they decide to leave. And others, like that personality type, be like, hey,
yeah,
don't you get all macho on me. I'll drive you out of here.
Yeah.
What about anything else? Like, what are some other signs?
That's all I can think of.
I think the eyes definitely a quite an amazing feature, particularly when you're in a cage and you can feel it just staring straight through you.
Yeah, they're certainly looking at you. They're certainly summing it up. They're looking at us just as we're looking at them.
Oops.
There's no question about that.
So if you're looking at its eye and getting a read from it, obviously, well, instead of saying obviously, if you're looking at its eyes and you're working out that it's working you out, how's that possible if you're looking into just a black orb of death?
Yeah, well, you're not looking into a black orb of death.
What are you looking at?
Well, you're looking into something that has a degree of intelligence. So it's trying to determine what you are. Potentially, are you a food source? It's just sounding you out.
What else? Is the eye actually black?
Well, it is at that point. But when it's passing by, it's just watching it.
Did you guys get to go in the bottom cage, the one that's at the
No.
floor?
No, I'd love to do that.
And they behave differently on the bottom, apparently.
That's what I hear.
No, I'd love to do that, but that's...
I hear you, sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to see them pursuing rays. Have you guys ever seen a white shark pursuing food? Not your bait.
No. Seals?
Yeah, seal, dolphin, whatever, anything.
Yep, seals. Saw a bird get consumed over there.
Did you? Thought they just spit them back up.
They did.
Oh.
Yep.
Then you can't say consume.
Well, he
Temporarily consume.
before he got indigestion.
How long did it take to spit them out?
Well, it disappeared underwater for a period.
Yeah.
Then it came up and spat it out probably 50 metres away.
It propelled the bird out of its mouth. 50 meters?
The shark was 50 metres from the boat.
Oh.
Yeah.
What about the spitting the water back out when they're breaching in South Africa? Have you seen that?
No.
Okay. I won't ask about that then. Something interesting, we've all talked about how there's less life in the ocean in general, yet we're seeing more whales. Is that true? I mean, is it possible for marine mammals like seal colonies to increase and whale populations to increase while we're simultaneously seeing fish stocks decrease?
I don't know. We've been seeing more whales along our strip of coast probably for the last 2 or 3 years. And we've actually been seeing orcas in close in the last couple of years.
And that's unusual.
Yeah, that's been fairly unusual, but certainly some of the southern right whales, seen quite a few of those over the last few years. And seal populations
Definitely increased.
certainly increasing.
Since they became protected, they've really picked up.
What are they eating? Well, the fish are gone.
I mean, you know, when I was saying that the ocean's depleted to what it was, it's not empty. It's just not as prolific. And you know, the whales, a lot of those whales around here are baleen whales. It's krill. They're not feeding through here.
No.
Yeah, and the ones that do feed through here are feeding off Portland at the Bonnie Upwelling. You know, all the krill are coming up. So we're not seeing any of the other sorts of whales, so it's hard to know.
What have you guys learned from sharks? Like, has observing sharks caused you to observe your own, I don't know, you probably changed some of your survival behaviors in the water based on what a shark has taught you?
For me, it certainly keeps me alert. It's really, you know, I don't go into the water and just sort of vague out. As soon as I'm out there, I'm alive. You know, it's just everything that goes on. Every sense is wide open. Other than that, I can't say anything specific.
What about the fact that you are out on tagging missions? Have you seen, do you have a favorite shark? Does one stand out in your memory as behaving in a certain way that made you think, wow, that one's a character?
No, I remember seeing the first large adult I saw years ago at the Neptune Islands. That one probably left the most lasting impression.
Because of its size?
No, the fact that it